In the early 20th century, community theaters were becoming more and more popular throughout America. It offered an opportunity for local artists and designers to share their craft and love for the arts with their fellow citizens. In 1955, a small group of like-minded individuals came together with a common goal: to produce high-quality shows. They created a mission statement and started their own community theater. They produced 2 shows during their first season. The first show, Goodbye My Fancy, was performed at the Swift Gym. They would produce it again during their 25th anniversary. In 1956, they hit the stage with Personal Appearance and My Three Angels. By the end of the 50s, Academy had performed 9 plays. They would eventually go on to produce 230 shows over the next 68 years.
The 60s. You go back to a time where imagination is real and you are putting yourself in your own world and bringing that audience with you.
There's an intimate connection that happens when you are a part of theater. And that's what it's all about, the connection. Academy produced some of the more popular shows being performed in America. The Miracle Worker, for one, was a blessing at the time for the community of East Greenwich. It's a story about the real-life Helen Keller and the woman who taught her how to communicate through sign language.
And that was at a time when there were countries and powers who, instead of fighting, they decided to talk. They were able to communicate. Just like how theater communicates with the actors and the players and the audience and the directors and everyone behind stage and in front of that stage.
Throughout the decade, Academy continued to produce notable shows such as Anastasia, The Odd Couple, which focuses on the friction between 2 extremely different personality types, and Little Mary Sunshine, which pokes fun at the past. With over 20 shows spanning throughout the decade, Academy persevered through a challenging time in America's history.
Kent State shootings, Watergate, and the breakup of the Beatles. As the turmoil of the 60s carried into the 70s, I think Academy wanted their audience to have an escape from reality, with some lighter shows like The Mouse That Roared, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and The Pirates of Penzance. National inflation and a recession left a lot of people looking for affordable entertainment. And thankfully, local theater remained an accessible opportunity.
The 1970s also introduced the world to summer blockbusters, which captured the hearts and imaginations of moviegoers nationwide. This may explain some of the decisions made by Academy to stage works which had been previously proven themselves to be lucrative, as feature films such as Guys and Dolls, My Fair Lady, and South Pacific.
What was evident throughout the full 10-year stretch was that Academy Productions had no permanent home. Shows bounced around amongst numerous venues, including the East Greenwich Civic Center, the Swift Gym on Pierce Street, along with the East Greenwich High School Auditorium. The rise of disco certainly had no influence over the tendency to continue choosing musicals like Oklahoma. As the decades began to wind down, life was briefly brought to an unexpected halt, courtesy of the blizzard of '78.
What that did, it stopped everything in the state of Rhode Island. It stopped traffic, it stopped roads, it stopped businesses, and it stopped people from coming out of their houses. But as the old show business adage goes, the show must go on, and Academy did that.
In the 80s, Rhode Island was home to a banking crisis that left many of its residents without any access to their hard-earned money. It's no surprise that Academy players produced such shows as How to Succeed in Business and The Importance of Being Earnest, and audiences loved it. Theater is known to be the truth-sayer of the show business industry, and Academy Players was no exception.
Even during this extremely challenging and fast-paced decade, Academy Players responded by producing relevant, charming, and fun shows. In this decade, the Academy family absolutely flourished. A new group of volunteers, fresh faces, were added to the organization. Their long-standing tradition of choosing shows that speak to such a broad audience continued to be at the front and center of its mission for the remainder of the 80s.
Entering the decade, Academy started their 1990-91 season with crowd-pleasing favorites such as Dracula and Steel Magnolias by Robert Harling and Gypsy by Arthur Lawrence. They did On the 20th Century, which is a large-scale musical. Anything Goes, Dames at Sea, Guys and Dolls, fabulous show directed by Joan Dillenbach.
What a bouquet. We had sold out houses and there was so much energy and everybody came out to audition for Academy shows. I was in quite a few of them. Actually, I met my husband during Kiss Me Kate, and he is my husband today.
Academy would go on to produce nearly 30 high-caliber shows during the 90s. Americans saw the rise and fall of VHS tapes, Beanie Babies, and Game Boys, which I still have. What held firm during a time of short-lived trends was Academy and their continued focus on community theater, creating civic pride through performance.
Much like the trends that swept America in the 90s that were popular one day and gone the next, community theaters were no exception.
When Academy began in 1955, there were historical theaters closing down and many followed.
45 years later, Academy continued to endure. They didn't focus on trends or what was popular. They focused on the plays and the stories they told. As the end of the decade approached, Academy continued to embrace the future and its possibilities.
A new millennium brought about a whole host of changes. In 2001, the United States fell victim to terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. And then in 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina, which destroyed much of southern Louisiana. During this time, Academy moved from the Odeum to the Armory in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. Partnerships were created with local high schools, interest in the arts was experiencing a rebirth, and small towns were embracing local business like never before, even in the wake of several tragedies.
Academy was most well known during this decade for producing one comedy and one drama per season. The theater became a way for people to escape some of the outside noise. Patrons flocked to the theater to regain faith in the human stories unfolding before them on the historic stage at the East Greenwich Armory.
As shows sold out, the country's ability to uplift its own grew. Small town support became an entire country's mantra. Academy players warmly opened its doors to local charities, and patrons began to show up to see the power of giving back.
This decade saw shows such as Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Lend Me a Tenor, and Music Man. Big sounds, beautiful costumes, and talent from local and tri-state actors was the core of the Academy players' playbill in this decade.
As we headed towards a new decade, Academy continued to successfully find ways to adapt, grow, and change within the times. After almost 60 years and over 150 shows, Academy made a decision to move from East Greenwich to Providence, and with the new location came a fresh start.
Providence has been the home to community theater for over 200 years. Union builders came from all over Rhode Island to help design and build the newest addition to that vast history. As the theater was beginning to take shape, adding excitement and possibilities, many conversations were being had among their members, like what makes Academy different. This led to establishing a community-based charitable component, which has been a trademark for most of their shows since 2011.
I remember when this was kind of conceptualized, and I was sitting at the dinner table with my parents, and Rita was talking about creating this whole side organization with it called Stage Door Project. And the most I can remember was like them making the logo and just like adding rainbow and adding a tree in the middle and just like, okay, what can we do to better the community? Not just making them happy, but like helping people grow.
Throughout their production of Rent, Academy was able to spread awareness and raise funds towards the AIDS Foundation. With Heathers, they focused on mental health. They put on a cabaret of different musicals, songs, and dances, and instead of charging an admission, canned goods were accepted at the door to donate to local food drives in Rhode Island. The James and Gloria Marin Cultural Arts Center was conceptualized as a youth program, offering creative spaces to learn and grow.
Lessons ranging from several unique art forms could be taught and nurtured. They were encouraged to employ their newfound knowledge and apply it to theater.
Academy did an outstanding job of finding innovative ways in joining those elements together, while still growing their youth program.
During this time period, we produced shows such as Legally Blonde, If Then, and my personal favorite, The Mousetrap, which I was given the opportunity to direct with my former student. There was also a focus on showcasing the talents of youth within our community, and we produced plays like Annie, Aladdin Jr., The Little Mermaid. I mean, trying to get that water just right was nearly impossible. And The Lion King Jr.
As another decade came to an end and 2020 approached, Academy, having produced over 50 plays during the 2010s, showed no signs of slowing down and looked toward the new decade with anticipation.
The dawn of the century's second decade and the first full one for the new, renamed Academy Players of Rhode Island was filled with both hope and promise. But the universe had other ideas. Before the season could fully get underway, we were all being introduced to words like coronavirus and COVID-19.
What was expected to be an issue for maybe a few weeks shut down the world for much longer than anyone could have anticipated. In January of 2020, the musical Parade was staged. The February production would be the last one for the next year and a half.
Tuck Everlasting, which was scheduled for a run at the Academy Players that month, was postponed indefinitely. The Academy seats were empty. The stage remained both eerily silent and bare. As the world slowly re-emerged from its lockdown, everyone began to wonder where things would go from here. Would audiences feel comfortable gathering in public again? Could actors wearing face masks still be heard clearly throughout the space? Would it change their performances?
As the dust finally began to settle, audiences were eager to be entertained again, and those providing that entertainment couldn't wait to get back to it. At long last, the Academy Players of Rhode Island made what many hoped would be a triumphant return with SpongeBob the Musical in July of 2021. In the years to follow, local playwrights began creating original work, whether some of that was developed due to cabin fever that they'd suffered throughout the prolonged shutdown, or it had just been inspired by events connected to the pandemic.
Academy veteran Frank O'Donnell led the charge with the reintroduction of two of his much-beloved Christmas-themed plays, Auntie Claus, a dysfunctional family sequel, and A Christmas Carmela, were respectfully and precisely the gifts many were eager to receive.
Those were followed by a remarkable piece of work entitled The Opposite of Hot Chocolate. David J. Valentin, its playwright, saw his vision grace the Academy stage in June of 2023. In an official farewell and reminder of just how profoundly COVID affected us all, longtime writer and local radio personnel Brian Mulhern finally saw his long-delayed production of The Butterfly Boys come to life.
The play was about COVID, and we had many plans to stage it a couple of different times. However, ironically, variants kept delaying the production of the play. But the Academy stuck with me, and that really made an impression on me. But we reached a point where things calmed down enough where I was invited to have this team, this family really, bring my story to life. And I was told very early on by my collaborators, boy, for somebody who writes as much as you do and was on the radio for 30 years locally, you're a pretty quiet guy. And I was quiet because I was sitting there absorbing and learning and becoming a part of this culture and slowly becoming a part of this family, which is exactly what it is. And the most amazing thing to come from all of it, because of the way that things are conducted in this very theater, is it became one of the greatest creative experiences of my entire life. And that's the magic of the Academy Players of Rhode Island and the people who work here, where there wasn't one ego. It was everyone coming together with a common goal, believing in each other, appreciating each other's talents and passions. It doesn't get any better or more pure than that.
The original works kind of show me that their eyes are open and their doors are open, and they're not just worrying about what's going to fill seats and what big names can we put up next. They're worrying about their people, their community,
and the art as a whole and offering as many opportunities as they can. And when you offer opportunities, it brings growth, it brings brightness, and that just leads to good things in the future.
Even for Drowsy, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think I would get cast as Kitty. I'm like, I can't play like a 1920s like Hollywood girl. There's no way. Like, cast someone who looks like me. But then they did. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, thanks. Like, that's awesome. And then the other Kitty, like, we couldn't look any more different. So I think just seeing like how they do like double cast, but they won't like cast people who necessarily look similar, I think is a good indication. Like, that alone, it's like, okay, so we don't care like what your physical attributes are. It's like, can you play this character? And most of the time people can, because it's about, you know, like your talent. So I think that's really good.
This past year we did Heathers the musical. And out of just nowhere, I listened to the music, I read the script, I watched whatever movies or videos that I could find online, and there was one character that I wanted more than anything. But it was a female character. And I asked the director if I could audition. She was like, yeah, bring it. And I got it. And being able to walk onto that stage for the first time where the lights blasted up, my special moment here, and I will never forget that. Yeah, it's my favorite.
I think it's great that they have it like front and center in the lobby, so like even if you're just coming in for like a question or if you get lost, you see that. Which I always think stuff like that, or like hanging like a rainbow flag, anything like that, it just makes you feel safer. So just like acknowledging that, like, yes, this exists, and yes, we do like support our marginalized communities. I think it's great, and it's a beautiful mural.
My son was, I think he was 10, and he auditioned for A Christmas Carol. He ended up getting the role of Boy Scrooge, and I would, because he was little, I would sit in the back of rehearsals and just do schoolwork or whatever. And at one point, the director needed something, and he turned around, and I was pretty much the only mom there, and he said, hey, can you help me with this or that? And I was like, sure. I never left after that. Like, I became the stage mom, and then I joined the board, and then I was directing, and it was this whole trajectory that I didn't even see happening in my life. And here I am. And I love it here.
With the building of each different buildings, I remember like the first iteration of it was 2 rooms. One day, I remember my parents were just looking at it and they're like, this isn't gonna work. Like, we need to make it bigger. And the second iteration came. If you turn this entire theater around, it was only in the lobby. So the lobby right now was the stage. And then my mom one day, I was like sitting with her in the lobby, and she was like, nah, we need to make this bigger. If we have the capability to do it, we're gonna do it. It was basically just like a really big back and forth of just like how to make this space a perfect space. Kind of like a home.
When I first started working on this documentary, I wanted to find out what makes Academy different. And I did. Got the opportunity to meet a lot of wonderful people. And they share their stories with me right here on Academy's main stage. And as I listened to everyone share their experiences, I kept hearing the same word to describe Academy. That word was home. For me, what makes Academy different, what makes Academy Academy, or the people.